Hey, what's up, everybody? This is a Ghastly Statements from GearWorks.com and the E2KG Network podcasting channel here on YouTube with a bajillion alerts going off. So we'll try and do something about that. Welcome back for another episode of the What's Your Issue weekly gaming comic books review podcast. This is the People's Weekly Comic Book Reviews podcast. It is spoilery. We will be talking about the books in every little bit of detail that we possibly can. We will be holding nothing back unless we so choose of our own accord. So if you haven't read your books, it's Monday night. Come on, man. What are you doing? New comic book day is on Wednesday. Let's knock those things out. Go away, read your books, come back and listen to this during your commute later on in the week or however you choose to do it. Here with me, as always, is my stalwart partner in crime, Mr. Stephen Laura. How you doing, Stephen?
I'm doing great.
Good. So we're going to talk about a lot of books. And I don't know about you, Stephen. It felt like it was a barn burner week for me. Lots of stuff that was in my stack was really good. Was that the case for you overall?
Good week too. Yeah, I had a hard time picking which ones to talk about.
I agree. I went right down to the wire, and I had a few. Had to make a few choices. So we are going to kick off tonight. If you don't know the format of the show, every week we get together and we talk about roughly 6 comic books in our review segment, which will head off the top of our show, and then we will reveal the best thing that I read this week for each co-host. Then we will talk about honorable mentions, which will cover any comic books that we read that we would have scored an 8.0 or above on a 10.0 scale in half-point increments. And then we will close out by enumerating our polls for next week so that you have some feeling of what you should expect during next week's podcast. This week, we're going to be a little rough. I'm a little off the cuff. I'm actually right in the middle of a PC upgrade, so I have not thoroughly written all my talking points as I normally do every week. That may mean that it may be shorter. Some of you may prefer that format, but regardless, that's what it is going to be. So this week, we're going to start off by talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, number 88. By IDW. So story by Kevin Eastman, actually Bobby Curnow and Tom Waltz. So it had like 3 different writers credited. And then actually, let me take that back. So Kevin Eastman architected the whole thing. The actual writing was done by Tom Waltz. Art by David Wachter, I believe it's pronounced, and colors by Rhonda Pattison. Letters by Sean Lee. So the sitch in this, I'm going to have a difficult time telling you where this book is because I haven't been on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, when I was a kid, I read TMNT, the original TMNT by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. I don't even know who published the comic because back then I wasn't, as aware of publishers and whatnot. But I read the old black and white style comic and then actually played a little bit of the role-playing game. But in this issue, the Turtles and a bunch of their friends are assaulting, I guess what I'll just call Mutant Island, for lack of a better term. There's a lot of genetically altered. It's kind of like an island of Dr. Moriarty, basically. There are a mixture of factions of people who are on the good side and people who are on the Turtle side and people who are on the other side. And in the midst of this, there is an additional faction led by some type of U.S. paramilitary group that is basically trying to destroy all of them. In the midst of all this, certain things are revealed. The primary villain is revealed to actually be, his physical appearance anyway, is revealed to be kind of a mannequin-style automaton being piloted by a, I hate to use the word, I guess like a mutated human or a human with some genetic defects who is very small, diminutive. And then this individual is able to take over and kind of mind control one of the key mutants involved in the fight, Slash, a very large, almost kind of a replicant of a mutant Ninja Turtle himself, but larger, much more dangerous with actual bladed claws. And they wrestle back and forth with this individual and gain control of Slash, only to find out that Slash has actually had a nuclear bomb implanted in him, and in a scene that is very reminiscent of the original Captain America mission to pilot the aircraft away at the end or near the end of World War II that landed him in the Arctic beneath the frozen ice. this individual takes off in a plane, actually piloted by another character, and then sacrifices himself. Not parachuting, but jumping out of the airplane and detonating out over the ocean. So the story was actually, this is actually one of the more moving stories that I read this week. There's a lot of emotion in a lot of the comics this week. This one really surprised me. I think I read this one. I think this was like the third comic that I read in my stack. And going into it, I was like, it's a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles thing. I'm sure we'll get a lot of martial arts and combat, and it'll be fun. But before that, I had read through Daredevil number 612 and Titans number 30, which were also particularly moving pieces emotionally. I didn't expect for this to kind of really hook me from an emotional aspect, but it sure did. And actually, as we start to get the reveal of what has gone on with Slash, I was really deeply rooted in the emotion. I kind of came off the tracks of the emotional hook when I realized that they were going to kind of Captain America it, and I was like, this has clearly been done before, but it was still pretty solid, particularly as on the other side of that bow wave, what you get is you kind of get all the mutant animals posseing up, really angry that this has been done to them and their friend, and clearly about to take off on a road probably laced with a good amount of vengeance. On art, it's a little difficult to sometimes judge a TMNT book. It's because the subject material is so different. It's kind of somewhere between a creature book and a superhero book. There are a lot of things in here that are really great. The coloring, and I guess I'm just getting a little weary. Years ago, we had this big thing in games where gamers used to always talk about brown games, and they hated brown games, and that was just kind of the typifying color palette at the time. We're getting a little bit of the same thing in comics, where there seems to be in vogue this singular or this centric, singular color or singular segment of the color spectrum that a given artist is utilizing. And this is a very brown comic, except for some of the flashback scenes. However, all in all, it's particularly good artwork. And when they get off of the brown motif, there are some really good pages here. In particular, the picture of Slash jumping out of the aircraft and then detonating over the island. Great emotes. Obviously, a hard thing to do to pull off. I forget what the word is, Stephen, about when you make kind of humanize and anthropomorphic, I guess might be the term. But there's some really good emoting in the face of some of the animals that are portrayed in the comic. So overall, and this is going to be a recurring theme throughout tonight. Overall, I scored this issue an 8.5, which actually put it in a 4-way tie for the comics that were all vying for my pick for the best thing that I read this week. Steven, did you read this comic? Steven, do I still have you? Or did I lose you? Steven's been having some connection problems. So I'm sure he is rebooting and trying to get back in. So we will just wing it for a bit. And actually, you're going to have to talk to me while I'm also trying to get the social media out, which is a little difficult to do when, hey, Steven, back?
This is my phone right now.
Okay. Did you read Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 88?
Yes, I did. That's why I just jumped on the phone, because I really want to talk about that. I didn't want to miss it out.
Yeah. What were your feelings on it?
I loved it. I broke into tears reading that issue because I was not expecting to see Slash die like that, and that really, like, goddamn, this comic book is like trying to blow up my heart and throw it in the trash or something like that. I just was not expecting that, and
So one of the things I mentioned, and it may have been while you were off air, is what I came off the rails a little bit when I realized that they were going to basically kind of parrot to me what was a lot of kind of the original Captain America story, where he's in a plane with a bomb that's going to go off, and he can't defuse it, and so he pilots it himself and crashes it in the Antarctic, and that's we kind of get the same thing here with Slash diving out of the airplane over the ocean and sacrificing himself. Did you did that impact you at all, or were you so caught up in the story emotionally that you were like,
because I thought they were gonna try to actually find a way to for Slash to actually come out alive. I didn't think it was gonna kill him off, but I should have seen that coming too. Because Ninja Turtles have killed characters before. I mean, they killed Shredder, so and they killed Donatello before, but he came back. But yeah, I just still was unexpected by it, and I didn't. I did like the interesting, crazy plot twist with Bishop's son being the actual villain. This whole entire time thing is Bishop is actually his son, and is he's like portrayed as a Hitler, like he's a half alien, uh, like a half like a mutation, like a mutated human being, and he like blames it on the he hates aliens himself for 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 being the mutation he's become that his father did to him. I thought that was a pretty interesting story.
yeah, so yeah, it begs the question, particularly in a week where one of the things going on out in the news cycle are these genetically edited babies that were born in China, and the Chinese government putting the kibosh on that project. It certainly brought up in me this question of, well, what defines humanity? What defines who gets to make the choice of what, like, when something is an abomination and when something's not an abomination? Because obviously what you were driven to come away with is how hypocritical this, like,
Yeah,
you know
it's critical. Go ahead.
this mutant child man thing, who's piloting a facsimile of a normal human being, you know throwing darts at like these mutants who are in many cases are more human than he is. It's just a pretty amazing little bit of writing. Caught me completely off guard. Solid comic, emotionally resonating, and just an all around really good book. So, Stephen, I'm going to let you talk to us about the Terrifics. This is something I'm interested in because I've been aware of this IP, but I have not had any time to go in and look on it. So I'm very curious to hear about the setup for this, and how good it is, or not. I
Oh,
don't know which it's going to
it's
be.
great. I liked it. All right, so the Terrifics is I'm only gonna say the writer and artist for right now because I had my notes and my computer is still restarting. But the writer was Jeff Lemire and the artist was Victor Bandogovic. And the story starts off with the Terrifics fighting off Dr. Dread, and yeah, and like towards the middle of battle, you find out that Dr. Dread is actually I forgot the character's name is a caveman character that yeah, it's like one of the caveman characters that that's from whatever. It's one of the caveman characters and what is it? They find out that was him, and he was the one that actually put the in a way where the Terrifics were stuck with each other, where they like couldn't like if they were to move a certain feet away from each other, they would actually die. So the Terrifics were forced to be a team to find out, what's going on. Excuse me. Why do you have to have? Why do I have to stay within a few feet away from each other? And that's what apparently Dr. Dread was behind all this. So that was a plot twist, and I thought that was a interesting plot twist. And he said he only did it because he wanted the love from Sapphire, which is Metamorpho's girlfriend, and she was never interested in him. She always was interested in Metamorpho, and he always hated that. And he wanted a way to make her father proud by being in love with Metamorpho, not Sapphire, because the thing is with Sapphire's father always hated Metamorpho, and he always liked the other guy. So I guess trying to find a way to make him proud and make Sapphire forget about Metamorpho. So yeah, and they do try to attack him with Tom Strong and his family, and somehow Dr. Dread escapes, and the the team feels like there's no reason for them to be a team anymore because they figure out how to get rid of the space that was making them like that if they get a few feet away from each other they'll die. Apparently got rid of that. They said some gravity space thingy that was affecting them to stay stuck to each other. But yeah, they figured out how to escape that, and they said there's no reason to be a team anymore. So Metamorpho, um, Plastic Man, Mr. Terrific wanted to split away from the team, and the only person that didn't want the team to split up was Phantom Girl. And I thought that was interesting because when she first arrived at the team, she didn't want to be part of a team. And her character evolved from wanting to be not part of the team to be part of the team. And she was crying, begging Mr. Fick and everybody else to keep them as a team. She wants to keep going on more adventures and
So
fight more villains.
so who's in the team again as far as the setup goes? It's Mr. Terrific, Plastic Man, Metamorpho, and who else?
Yeah, it's a Metamorpho, Plastic Man, Mr. Terrific, and Phantom Girl. That's it. It's four people.
Okay, very
It's
good.
basically the Fantastic.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Which would make them the third version of the Fantastic Four that was seen this week, which we actually won't be talking about Fantastic Four number 4, but there was just as the Fantastic Four were returning to Earth in our dimension, they were there was an attempt to replace them by a superhero team called the Fantastics, which was also a very solid comic. Didn't quite make it into the 8.0 or above category, but still very good. What did you score this book? Do you remember?
I'll give it a 8.0
Okay, all right.
because I really like the character relationships between the characters, and I liked how Phantom Girl is being emotional about being a team.
Okay, all
So
right.
I hope they stay as a team.
All right. So I did not read that comic. So let's move on and talk about Infinity Wars Weapon Hex number 2, which you are going to brief, but I also read. So I'm hoping we get a chance to riff and jam about this a little, but I will let you kick it off.
Book. Sorry, I don't have my notes on me still. What book you said?
This is Infinity Wars Weapon Hex number
Oh,
2.
okay. Next, okay. Yeah, so the writer for Weapon X number 2 is Ben Acker and Blacker, and can't even figure out the artist at the moment.
Yeah,
So
let me.
yeah.
I just realized foolishly I've got the book right here, so I can help you out. So yeah, written by Ben Acker and Ben Blacker, as you mentioned, penciled by Gerardo Sandoval, Victor Nava and Gerardo Sandoval on inks, and Israel Silva on colors, and the great Joe Caramagna from VC taking care of the lettering duties. So I will let you take care of the rest of it.
Okay. So yeah, the story is coming off. It's coming from the last issue where Weapon Hex's mother and father are like a religious cult, and they create a whole bunch of cloned like humans and like give some type of blood or like some blood magic to Mephistocon, which is like some Mephisto kind of thing. And they never actually revealed him, so I don't know what mixture he's supposed to be. But yeah, they give some like blood magic to him to feed off of, so their civilization can stay alive. And and towards the end of the first issue, the mother passes away, and she tells before she passes away, she tells Weapon X that she has a sister and she has to go save her and like go off on her own because her father is just using her to to feed off of Mephisticon. So this issue was just them fighting was just it's basically just the action part of the issue where you just fight off the villain and which is the father. Yeah, they fight off the father and win free of him. They you see Weapon X finds her sister and her and her sister Speed Weasel, which is like a thing's combination of the Wizard and Gabby, which is also pretty interesting. And so yeah, they both fighting off the father and they fighting off of magic, which is a mixture with magic and Sabretooth. So yeah, they fight them off, they kill them off, and they go on their own to more adventures, I guess. So yeah, I go ahead.
Now, so I
Uh,
know you mentioned that you had fun reading the first issue. What did you score this book overall on the second come around?
I'll give it a 7.5 because I really enjoyed the first issue, but I know this issue was okay because it was still good, but it was just a whole straight up action story. There
Yeah,
was not really any dialogue, and it was just more of an action
and
pace.
we were pretty close. I scored it a 7.0. Although on my scale, the way I come at it, there's kind of a significant difference between 7.0 and 7.5 because 7.5 to me is a book that is like tweak one thing and you've got a book that is in the great category. I just my problem with this was like and I guess maybe I'm bouncing a little more off of these Elseworld style, like the Elseworld, What If, those kind of book styles that like aren't labeled as such, and both DC and Marvel seem to be doing a lot of them right now. Like I'm just not as interested in it. I'm like, you guys have both of those the big two publishers have it entirely dorked their notion of continuity over the last kind of couple iterations of their universes. I feel like they're both kind of hitting a stride now between DC with Rebirth and Marvel with whatever they're doing, which I think they've chosen not to label as anything different. They've just dropped the Marvel Now branding that they were doing for the last few years. Um, you know, excuse me, we've got Wolverine back in kind of a weird way, which we saw in Fantastic Four, and a few other things. And I just,
So really confusing me lately
yeah,
because it's every Return of Wolverine, it doesn't make sense to Infinity Wars
yeah,
and
I
other.
don't, right, I don't know, I don't understand. This is a really weird way to me to try and capitalize on the fervor of like the movie, and I kind of feel like if you're going to do the MCU thing and you're going to label it off of a great comic book event or arc, then just capitalize your additional profits in your comic book market by the fact that people are going to go back and buy like the trades for that. Like that's enough money for you to grab. Like don't contort what's going on in the comic book universes to have the Infinity War name in it just so people go out and buy more comics when it's like really has nothing to do with what's going on in the MCU, and we're not interested in it because Infinity War happened for us years ago, and we read it then, and we get it why we should go see the movie, but and then to for that to be going on the heels of Secret Wars Battle World, which to me was a complete travesty of events. I'm like, man, guys, just live in your continuity right now and give us great stories from that. It was a ho-hum book. I was like, yeah, I get it. It's got an art style that, again, drifted a little bit too much towards manga, which I feel like is another thing that seems to be going on more prevalently in Marvel than in DC. I was like, fine. Like, it didn't, and this is what I grabbed from your pull list last week. It didn't make me angry that I read it, and it didn't entirely feel like a complete waste of time, but it definitely didn't. It didn't feel like I was rewarded for having it in my stack.
Okay. Yeah, I could agree with that.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and push on. So the fourth book in our review rundown segment this week is actually Titans number 30, which I have actually now onboarded this into my recurring pull list because of the fact that 2 months ago, I grabbed it from your pull list and kind of got enamored with it. It's very interesting. I guess what I hear, and again, I try not to keep up with this stuff, but I hear that there is kind of this effort going on at DC to get rid of the sidekicks, which I'm just like, I don't know, how are you guys ever going to do that, right? And why? Like, you have a solution, take all the sidekicks and put them in the Teen Titans, right? Like you fix that problem. But I don't know.
Yeah, because they have 3 teams or teams already. They have Titans, they have Teen Titans, and they have Young Justice.
Right. So like, I don't know, whatever. So this story written by Dan Abnett, pencils by Minkyu Jung, John Dell and Scott Hanna on inks, Adriano Lucas on colors, and Dave Sharp on letters, who, again, it seems like Dave Sharp is doing the lettering for all of the comics in the DC universe. But that all being said, this was a very interesting issue, and it continues to earn high marks from me in reviews each week. This is continuing the story of kind of the journey of leadership of Donna Troy, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some kind of weird leadership arrangements going on in the DC universe. But this is one where they took out Nightwing / Red Robin, like any Robin that would have been in Titans, relegating Damian Wayne to be in Teen Titans. So that leadership juncture is gone. And then they removed any notion of Aqualad. So that leadership widget is gone, leaving Donna Troy to lead this ragtag group of Titans who consisting of Beast Boy, Miss Martian, who technically is a member of the Justice League, but was assigned to be their liaison and now is kind of sort of really a member of the team. Beast Boy, a Raven who has lost her soul, and this new version of Steel, which I'm not really super happy about that. It's a girl in armor. And she's African American, which just feels like a mimic of what they're doing with Ironheart over in Marvel. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, because she was in the preview 52. She's Steele's niece. So
yeah, but I
just
took
like the man. Because they couldn't figure out a name for her.
Yeah, I don't need it. Right. So this is this team of Titans that is it's just thematically weird because when the Titans title was relaunched, the whole point of it was to regather all of these sidekick heroes who you'd fallen in love with as members of the Teen Titans, and to really grow them up and make them this new team. And now we've completely drifted away from that. at any rate, it's good, but it's good. Dan Abnett's a great writer. He's obviously one of my favorites. I read a lot of his stuff when he was not doing mainstream comic stuff, and it's really neat seeing him getting back to doing mainstream comic stuff. So having had a brief episode with the Ocean Lords in a side issue that was intertwined with Drowned Earth, which we are going to talk about this week. The Titans retreated, basically with their tails between their legs, and boomboxed themselves clearly like halfway across the universe to a place on planet that they don't know where they are, and they've been trying to get off of it. It's completely a Swiss Family Robinson kind of Lost in Space kind of episode over the last 2 issues, which is again has been good. Part of what's going on in this is Beast Boy, and I didn't know that this was a thing with him, but I guess like the more time he spends, particularly as like violent animals, he starts to take on elements of their persona and can potentially lose himself in those animalistic instincts. So that is what happened last episode. He came back to the camp and smashed a lot of the things that Steel had been working on to get them off the planet. Got into a fight with Miss Martian, and having already sustained injuries and then taking more damage in the fight with Beast Boy, loses her ability to conceal her appearance as a Martian and blows up into full-on white Martian mode. But amazingly, kind of does still like retains control of herself. She's still not like a murderous white Martian. Excuse me, I'm still fighting the cold and sore throat from last week. And so they just have a big old fight. On art here, I like what Jung is doing with the art. There's some incredibly detailed stuff going on here. And again, some great effort at emoting in the portraits and the facials. Because it's, again, kind of a creature book. He's got to deal with Steel, who has an armored face, which somehow she's able to convey emotion through the armored face. I don't really understand that, but it's fine. But in particular, Beast Boy and Miss Martian, full-on creature feature, he's really got to, figure out a way for them to convey emotion, and he does a really great job with that. Also, a really great job with landscapes. The planet is obviously completely fictional and doesn't really represent any type of geography or forestation on Earth, and he's got to kind of wing that, again, getting some good help on colors from Adriana Lucas. On story, you really get a sense of the conflict and the struggle between the Titans. There's still very much this coming of age stuff, but again, it's a little matured and rounded out to be more of a mid-20-somethings coming of age and dealing with things. The crisis, Abnett then swerves the crisis from being about Beast Boy and Miss Martian to being about Raven as we close it on the end. And she has some kind of episode where she can see her soul imprisoned on some other plane, having lost it a few years ago. You get a big leadership speech from Donna, kind of, again, rising to the occasion of being the leader. And also there's a no secrets, set of pages in here where, because apparently they didn't know that Miss Martian was a white Martian. But this is also the first time that Donna tells the team that Roy Harper has died, which she has known for several issues, but has been keeping from the team, fearing that they would get distracted by it. And then I think, and then another thing that this comic does well is I love cameos and I love reveals and I love like when I can hear the big heroic music anthem like playing in the background, when you turn the page. In the midst of this, one of the things Steel has come up with is he's cobbled together enough parts to fire off a distress beacon. And in the last page of the book, in a big splash page portrait, that beacon gets answered by Kyle Rayner. And this in a time where after I think it was Robert Venditti just completed his run on Green Lanterns, and they kind of shut all the Lanterns books down and are just restarting them. And you have the names escaping me for some reason, Geoff Johns returning to write about Hal Jordan, you've kind of had a lot of the other Lanterns who have recently stepped to the fore in the last few years have faded into the background, and we're not seeing as much of them. So this is a really cool opportunity to bring Kyle Rayner into the picture. And with a slightly different uniform, he's added some kind of armor pieces on to his forearms and the boots. So it's interesting to see where they head with that. Steven, did you read this book at all?
Yeah, I did read this one. I did enjoy this much more than the other ones, and I just liked it because the characters had a really emotional moment, like with Beast Boy fighting Miss Martian and Miss Martian revealing her identity, and Donna Troy just, I mean, revealing that Arsenal had died, and it was a lot it was a lot of emotions to consume. I actually enjoyed that flow of characters growing up and learning about each other and working as a team. They actually were able to work as a team, and I thought that was interesting in this book.
Yeah, and after a good bit of struggle, so they really kind of earned it. Again, this was another one of the issues that was caught in a four-way tie this week, with me having scored this book in 8.5. The fifth book in the rundown and my last book in this segment was Daredevil number 612. So this brings to conclusion a pretty amazing 2 years of serendipity where you have Charles Soule, who at one point was writing a lot of books across both DC and Marvel as a freelancer, and then and also practicing law in his law practice. He eventually became a full-time comic book creator and was brought over to Marvel under an exclusive contract. Shepherded the Death of Wolverine, some of the books that spun off of that, and then has also been mixed into the Star Wars desk and other things, and was and for a while leading up to that, another one of his big things is he was writing She-Hulk, which was a natural pairing because Jen Walters is obviously a lawyer, and then he gets an opportunity to write Matt Murdock, who is probably the most prominent lawyer in the Marvel universe. There have been times over these last few years, and I haven't stayed on the book. I've kind of rolled onto it and rolled off of it. There are times where the book hasn't necessarily captivated me, and times when it absolutely did. So it's interesting to come back here for the closing issue. You have Phil Noto on art, and again, Noto is an artist who a lot of the book and the story and the content to me paired well with his art, but then there are also I'm not super crazy about him as an action artist. I feel like dramatic scenes he's very good in, but I'm not super crazy about how he draws and handles fights. But anyway, you have Charles Soule having written this. Phil Noto is the artist. Clayton Cowles on letters. And again, this is part of that is because this is a book that's really written in kind of a very pastel, watercolory kind of monotone background. Except a few of the pages, there are definitely some more vibrant colors in a lot of these. It's an opportunity to kind of draw this wide-ranging cast of characters in this courtroom scene. He's got Doctor Strange, Thor, Iron Fist, Power Man, a lot of kind of the Marvel Knights kind of characters, Cap, She-Hulk, Spider-Man, and the Fantastic Four, Black Panther with his helmet off. So some interesting opportunities here. Then again, like I said, in the dramatic scenes, like his art is really kind of amazing. They almost look like courtroom drawings. And actually, I ought to pull the thread. I would be very interested to find out if he actually did get his start as a courtroom artist, and maybe that's how Charles Soule knew him. And again, the dramatic scenes are really great. In this, Matt's mixed up with like his brother, who I think is somebody who claims to be his brother, but it really isn't. He winds up fighting uh, a person who's much more, just as much a match for him as Bullseye. I forget what this villain's name is. I think it's Vigil, or something
Yeah.
like that.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. It's a new character.
yeah. And then we also get an opportunity to see some of the Inhumans that Matt has been working with, which was a really interesting part of this whole, like, again, like 2 or 3 year time period that Soul has been writing it. What's very interesting here, story wise, is at the end of this, what we find out is that this whole thing has been basically a big dream sequence. Matt has actually been on the table, having been hit, I think, by like a semi truck in the preceding issue, and has actually been fighting for his life while he's been undergoing surgery. And he doesn't make it. He sees Karen Page at the end, and then you actually turn the page. It's actually the second to last page of the book, and it's entirely black. Um, and I actually paused on that page for a good 5 to 10 minutes because I wasn't sure. I didn't tap my iPad to see, like, man, is this the last page? Like, am I going to turn this and like there's going to be nothing? It's just going to be Charles Soule signing off. So I really like just kind of sat there and I was like, I don't know if I want to turn this page. So you turn the page and there's a few remaining words, which is basically Daredevil, Matt Murdock dying. It's the last things he says before he fades, and then Charles Soule scripts at the bottom of the page, the end, and that's a wrap. Now, because of the pretty severe ending in this book, I actually read through some of the letters, back pages, which I tend to do when the creative team is signing off. And there's all kinds of stuff associated with this ending. We know it's not the end because we saw, we got the word on Twitter that Chip Zdarsky is taking over Daredevil. So it was a little. So this is one of two major deaths I think that we saw this week, where a character dies, but we know that we immediately are told that they're not really dead, which again, you get to, does that kind of diminish and marginalize the whole event? But the one thing that was weird for me, and the one thing that I think is the reason why I scored the book highly, and I scored this an 8.5, and we're going to talk about that a little bit as well, about why was it not a 9.0 or higher, given that it's the sign off of a creative team and the death of a character. I think there's a reason for that. But I've read a lot of Charles Soule over the last, I guess I'd say 4 years or 5 years since whenever he came on the scene as a major force, back in DC when he wrote this whole Superman Wonder Woman run. One of the reasons, so again, this was a book that I was like, I don't normally like the unreliable narrator, right? Where like there's a scene being painted and that scene is really not the thing. But you're normally incentivized to trust like the exposition going on in the background, and then you get through this and it's a dream. A momentary gut reaction to say, here we go again, right? We've done a trope or a cliche or something that's been done before, but it's so well written that I'm like, no, I don't feel that way. I feel like it's okay. I mean, it's Charles Soule, right? Certain writers, I think I don't even want to say get away with it. Certain writers can pull it off, even when it's something that's been done before. So I know this was a big issue for you in your stack, and I want to kind of hear what you thought about it as well, Stephen.
Oh, I actually hated it. I didn't like it at all. I gave it a 5 for me. It's just that I kind of just didn't. It felt cluttered to me that the whole entire story, the pacing was really not working for me, and I just didn't like the ending part where it confused me. Where they was telling me I was just sure if this whole entire book was a dream or only partial book of the book is a dream, and that kind of disappoints me. The whole entire story is a dream because then I don't know where the whole story is capitalizing off. Because Um, Kingpin was mayor in other books. Like they would show him as the mayor of New York in other books. So I'm like confused of whether what part is actually canon, what isn't.
Yeah, and I definitely get how that could have happened. I mean, they do say in the book that um, they do address that. So the Kingpin is still mayor of New York. Daredevil does not defeat Vigil. Um, and there,
Also, dream.
yeah. So there's a specific page where maybe where they show him on the operating table. Um, he says I've won nothing. And then there's a couple panels where he says, there's no moment of realization that I needed to use the time that I had. No grand unmasking of Frank McGee and the others. No last tragic night. No battle against incredible odds. No redemption. No perfectly timed reveal. He specifically says there's no perfectly timed reveal of just the information I needed to bring the Kingpin to trial. So the whole thing about the Kingpin going to trial is completely in the dream world. Um,
That really
no,
disappoints me.
yeah, no outpouring of support from the city's heroes. No glorious takedown of Wilson Fisk. No final epic fight with the Vigil. So those are the two things that specifically struck out to me, lettered in those panels, which was he didn't take down Wilson Fisk, so Wilson Fisk is still the mayor of um
Yeah,
of New York.
because I thought actually on how he took out the Kingpin, like how he reeled everything, and it's just kind of disappoints me that was all a dream.
Well, and that's the interesting thing about the creative process, right? Is I mean, Charles Soule knows damn well that this is a riff that's been done before. He knows it's a risk, right? And still he chooses to take it, and sometimes that's what you do. And you wind up with an issue that's probably pretty divisive. You get some people like me who are are okay with it. You get some people who really loved it, and you might get some people who very sharply disagree with it. For me, one of the reasons this didn't seat at a 9.0 or higher, and as I was reading it and I got done with it, I was like, excuse me, we've seen a lot of send offs in the past year or two. This was good and it was up there, but it didn't exceed a lot of the other send offs. And the one in particular that sticks out of my mind is the Brian Michael Bendis send off of Miles Morales um, when he wrote that final issue. And again, there wasn't a lot of fighting. It was a heartbreaking issue. You get Miles, almost dying, and all the heroes and friends who come in and sit with him. Um, and it's a very emotional issue. But to me, it's a bigger send off than this is, at least as far as how it sticks to landing. So, Stephen, let's go on and talk about the final book in the review segment, another issue that we both read. And I think I may have written the number down wrong. It's Batgirl number 29.
Yeah, I voted that wrong at one point too, and I corrected it. I remember I did that. So yeah, this background number 29 is written by uh Margaret Scott. The artist is Paul Pelletier, and the inker is Norm Ruppin, and the colorist is Jordi Belair, and the letter is Deron Bennett. So yeah, I this story is coming off of it's like the first new arc because they changed the writer for the series, and it starts off with Batgirl finding Grotesque, and she noticed that his MO is kind of different, and he's actually killing people that are like famous artists. They have like art, like kind of like an art gallery. They like put their stuff in museums and stuff like that, like art museums. And apparently, Batgirl finds out that it wasn't Grotesque that that was killing these artists. It was somebody else who was dressing up as Grotesque, and she finds out that it's one of the detectives that she's known and that works with Jim Gordon, which is Detective Douglas. And she finds out that person is, and then she noticed that Jim Gordon is went to go to the art gallery that Gotham is having, like a big art gallery party, and apparently Gortask and another villain that's also part of the plot. It's just Warm, which is a villain that was in Nightwing. He was introduced in Nightwing, and Batgirl had helped Nightwing defeat that villain. And now he's on the run again and going against Batgirl, which I thought was interesting because when I was reading Nightwing with that villain, I thought it was more interesting for him to fight Batgirl because he's a tech villain, and I could see her. I mean, I could see him fighting Batgirl rather than Nightwing. I didn't think it really fit with Nightwing. And I thought that was interesting that they also put her in put him in Batgirl. So I actually like that they put this in here. And in the story, Batgirl is fighting Grotesque and Warm, and somehow uh, Warm ends up killing Detective Douglas with Grotesque, and she ends up fighting off Warm, but Warm eventually escapes, and they save the people from the art gallery, and Jim Gordon's in the hospital, and he gets to better health, and Batgirl that ends up taking surgery for her back because the chip on her back during the first issue of Margaret Scott, it was damaged and she couldn't walk that well, like her, because she has a chip, giving their ability to walk, like some weird technology with microchip that connects to her brain. So yeah, so now she's taking the surgery again to able to regain her ability to walk at the end of the issue. So I really like this issue because I think Marcus Scott is doing a great job with Batgirl. I really liking the when she first started with the series, because she's bringing Batgirl to the dark roots where like Gail Simone was at with Batgirl, and I didn't like the other writers after Gail Simone because they were trying to make Batgirl to like a younger teenage character with always on her phone, and it just didn't work for me. It was too lighthearted, and it just wasn't for me. I just didn't like the direction they took it, and this writer is taking more of a Gail Simone type of direction where the stories are much darker and the characters. I mean, Batgirl's going through a more challenging fight with Worm and Grotesque, and I did like. The only disappointment from the story was that the whole Detective Douglas actually being the real Grotesque kind of disappointed me because it kind of confused me with the story, and it kind of threw like a wrench. Like it's made the story a little bit like it made a flaw into the story. That's what I'm saying. And I also did like one thing about Margaret Scott does with Batgirl with her epic memory, that she doesn't make it perfect. She makes it flawed. And I thought that that was interesting, that her epic memory is not like some god given gift that she like. Because the problem with the previous writers, they make Batgirl's epic memory like perfect, and it doesn't work that way. Humans, yeah, they have some special skill, but that skill is not a perfect godsend ability where nothing is flawed. The ability is not flawed, and I like that how she made it flawed. Like it wasn't always accurate in her, and she still was trying to figure things out with her flaws. I think that was interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, cool. So what did you score this book overall?
I gave it a 8.0.
Okay, nice. We squared up on that one perfectly. I also gave it an 8.0. Why don't you go ahead and we're going to saunter on into talking about the best thing I read this week, which is a selection that each co-host makes of, quite obviously, the best comic book out of their stack that they read the preceding week. We've been talking about the books that shipped Wednesday, the 28th of November, a fifth Wednesday following Thanksgiving. Was it a fifth Wednesday, or was it just it was just a fourth Wednesday? I guess it was just a fourth Wednesday.
I don't know. I wasn't keeping.
Right. So I definitely want to talk about the book that you picked as the best thing you read last week.
Okay. It's Aquaman Justice League Drown #1. Excuse me. And the writer is Scott Snyder, artist is Franz Manapul, Howard Porter, and it was Scott Lewinsky. He had 3 artists, and the colors is Francis Manapul and Hi-Fi, and the letter was Tom Lapatino, and yes, that's about it. There's no information on who the ink is, where, but that's it. But yeah, the book was coming off of it leads off with Mira, Superman, and the Flash, fighting off the ocean gods. I mean, from that planet, and their Black Manta, and apparently Aquaman and Wonder Woman meets up with them, and they all fight off the villains, and they also in the middle of the story, there's a discussion between when they escape. There is the discussion between Mira and Aquaman whether they should kill the gods, or they were arguing whether they should kill the gods or find a way to stop what they're doing and come to some type of agreement where they can be able to save their planet or whatever. So yeah. So Aquaman was, when they went to go fight again, Aquaman was able to push them to the other side and decided to free the humans from the water, and to not fight with Aquaman and just make peace. And I thought that was very interesting, and I kind of like that they was able to make an understanding of each other. And the only thing is that Black Manta disagreed with the ocean gods were doing, and they ended up. I mean, Black Manta was fighting Aquaman, and they removed the power from Black Manta, and I thought that was interesting, and the fight scenes very well done. I did like that, and I liked how I thought that was interesting how they was using the artifact, the Tear of Extinction. Well, Mira was using it to fight off everyone. That was also interesting, and I think I also thought it was interesting how Aquaman ended up sacrificing himself in order to defeat the ship with Black Manta was in, and so yeah, the ship would. I thought that was interesting how he went to go destroy the ship and apparently free everyone from whatever was affecting them. And I thought the story came well together. I didn't notice there was 3 different artists in this book, and it didn't just to me it didn't shut the flow of the story. It was very well done to me. I was able to still enjoy the story with 3 different artists. So I would give this a 9.0.
Okay. Yeah, that wasn't that too far off from you. I gave it an 8.5. And it actually fell short of a 9.0 for me because of the 3 artists. And I agree. Now we had another book in our stack this week. I think we both read Wonder Woman #59. which I was not a huge fan of, and that had a pretty jarring shift in artists.
Yeah, I didn't like.
Between I think it was Carl. I can't remember what the first, but it was Nico Leon, also on Wonder Woman, who, if I have that correct, right? I think, or maybe it's just no. Nico Leon was on some other book that I read this week in conjunction with another artist. This was actually Carrie Nord in this one. It's the Nico Leon book that I read this week, though, and I can't remember. Maybe it was Titans that he was on. I think that was it. Sorry, I said I would be a little. No, glad damn it. There was some book that I read this week, and it was the second week in a row. Oh, Fantastic Four.
Oh yeah, that was a mess.
Yeah, so he was on with Stefano Caselli, who I think is a really great artist. And that shift between the two of them was very abrupt and jarring and very severe in the difference between those two art styles. This one we have Howard Porter and Francis Manapul, and when the two of them did the art for this entire arc in different books, different issues, I was okay with it. Again, Howard Porter does a very specific art style, but then he also, there's a lot of experimentation, I feel like, with the things that he does, and there are some things that, like I mentioned when I reviewed the one issue of this arc that he did by himself. When he's on, but man, where he's off, and there's always like 10% that's not quite landing. It is, it shakes you right out of the story, right? You're like, whoa, what? Wait, why does that Superman look like that? There's some really great classic Justice League moments in here. I feel like we get eye patch Superman, also with the jacket, because when Mira, Flash, and Superman are in the throne room, apparently one of the things they did was they grabbed a lot of the coats and clothing that had been left in the throne room, and that was those garments would protect them from the waters from being transformed into fish people. Again, you get some great heroic, like, music swelling in the background kind of moments where Black Manta turns on the sea lords, the ocean lords, and throws Aquaman like off the side of the ship. But Aquaman has grabbed on and kind of gives Black Manta this big comeuppance response, because Manta's saying, you got your power back. What good does it do you? And Aquaman's like, well, when you've transformed all of the superheroes on this planet into fish, my aquapathic powers are like really a big deal. So I thought that was pretty awesome. Just the way the whole story is kind of brought around in the end was really cool. You get Aquaman making, when they get to the point where the Death Kraken is still a problem for them, even though they've defeated the Sea Lords and Black Manta. You get a panel, lower right-hand corner, you get a panel that very clearly from Aquaman emotes that he's about to sacrifice himself. And I'm like, I don't want this to happen. It's a page that I paused on, not for quite as long as I did on the single black panel page in Daredevil number 612. But, excuse me.
This is when Aquaman's to be alive.
Well, I didn't. I thought they were about to take him off the chessboard, which would make sense after an arc where he featured very prominently, and potentially would make sense. I don't know. Maybe it makes sense when his movie is about to come out this month, because maybe you take him out of comics so that what's going on in comics doesn't distract from the story that they're telling on the big screen. I don't know. I was very happy to see that they were not removing him from the chessboard, and maybe it's yet again another opportunity for Wonder Woman and this Wonder Woman Aquaman pairing that's been going on.
Yeah, I like that. They connection now with each other.
Yeah. Well, and in the past, the most interesting connection that I'd seen written into the pages of the Justice League were when Aquaman and Gian Jones were co-chairs of the Justice League. I thought that was a very awesome moment in the Justice League's history. I mentioned a little bit about how we have some weird leadership things that are portrayed and written into the comics this week. When Batman shows up as a reinforcement and kind of saves Wonder Woman, the line he mentions is that he programmed the suit to always always seek out the Justice League leader. And when Martian Manhunter is absent, Diana is apparently the second in command of the Justice League, which I just thought was weird, particularly since for a very large portion of this arc, I'd say about 70%, it was all about Batman kind of being like the Bill Belichick of the Justice League, sitting in the Hall of Justice, like calling all the plays and shots. So I was like, really? Like, okay. But it was neat. It's a big superhero comic. And again, this was another thing that I rated an 8.5. Could have definitely been my thing for the best thing that I read this week. But for me, I wound up sticking with Daredevil number 612 as Charles Soule sign off to Daredevil. And we don't need to talk anymore about that comic because we talked about it sufficiently. Steven, why don't you go ahead and run through your honorable mentions so we can go ahead and wrap up and get out of here?
My honorable mentions is oh God. Let me see if I can.
I'm sorry. Do you need me to? I can read them off for you if you want me to. So Steven's honorable mentions this week were Injustice versus Masters of the Universe number 5, Dead Man Logan number 1, Ironheart number 1, which is very interesting. Old Man Hawkeye number 11. You have been, you've continued to be impressed with that ongoing. Spider-Gwen Ghost Fighter number 2, and Faith Dreamside number 3. Steven, do I still have you, or did you check out?
It's just I can still hear you. Yeah, I'm
okay.
No, because I was looking at my flock and see if I can see the honorable mentions there.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Well, why don't you keep it up, and then that way when we get to your next week's polls, you can go down.
The reason why I picked Ironheart because it was pretty interesting. I was not expecting to enjoy that, and a lot of people are liking on the Twitter feed. I've been in it as well, and it was pretty interesting. I liked how the writer used the intelligence of the character and expanded upon it.
Well, it's good to hear.
I think Ben doing that. Like Bendis said this girl was super smart, but he was not using any for smarts at all. And right. I kind of like the spider was actually using it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the books are pretty interesting. That's what I've been liking so far on the list.
And Faith Dreamside number 3, what is that?
Oh, that's a Valiant book with one of the Harbinger characters.
Oh, okay, right, with their version of Faith. Okay, all right, gotcha. Yeah. Yep. My honorable mentions last week, I think we've talked about almost all of them. Titans number 30, I rated an 8.5. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 88 was also an 8.5. Aquaman Justice League Drowned Earth number 1 was an 8.5. And Batgirl number 29 for me was an 8.0. For next week, it's kind of a weird week somehow. And I think, again, this is the whole like accordion, this compression spreading dynamic we get for across some of the publishers with the disruption of the Thanksgiving holiday. I will be reading. So a lot of my books that are in my recurring pull list, which generally I try and keep spread out across the weeks. So, in any given week, I should only have like 4 comics that are in my required reading list. And then the rest should be things that I could just play around and do drop-ins in. But this week, actually like almost everything, I have 9 slots available and almost all of them are taken up by things that are on my recurring pull list. So Batman number 60, Deadpool number 7, Immortal Hulk number 10, Justice League number 13, which will be the start of a new arc focusing on the Martian Manhunter and Hawkgirl. Red Hood Outlaw number 29, Star Wars number 58. So we will get to see the next part in the arc of the Luke Han Leia years in between episodes 4 and 5. Deathstroke number 38, which will be interesting because we actually see Deathstroke showing up in Aquaman Justice League number 1 this week, albeit as fish person Deathstroke, but it's still interesting. Ninjak number, so from Steven's list, I will also pull Ninjak number 14 and Doomsday Clock number 8. Steven, do you have Flock available to run down your pull list?
Yeah, now it's showing up because for some reason it wasn't showing up earlier.
Okay.
but I think
Yeah.
it was. Um. So yeah, the my pull list is Doomsday Clock number 8, Doctor Strange number 9, Kick Ass number 10, Ninja K number 14, Shazam number 1, The Walking Dead 186, and X-Men's Exterminator number 1. And I also will be picking up Star Wars 58 and Deathstroke number 38. That's it.
Now, just to make sure I pull the right thing, you wrote it as Ninja K. I normally write it as Ninjak. We are talking about the Valiant comic, right?
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
that for some reason that specific volume that series is called Ninja K, but the
Huh.
character
Okay.
is called.
Okay.
They
All right.
just because the book was about a whole bunch of organizations that had. I mean, that you find out that the organization had a whole bunch of different ninjas through different
Okay.
periods of time, and they had an alphabetical order, and he
Okay.
was the K one.
Okay. Very cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we are very pressed for time, and my throat is about to give out. So I'm going to kind of hurry the sign off here. Thanks very much, everybody, for, excuse me, for joining in on episode number 9 of What's Your Issue. Once again, as always, on behalf of Gearworks.com, the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, the Rounding Off Affinity Gaming channel on YouTube, and the For Love of Gaming page on Facebook, ultimate awesomeness and its entire ring of content. The podcast is available on YouTube, Pocket Cast, SoundCloud, and iTunes. Come back here next week. We will be running down the comics again from all the things that we read and the comics that we just told you would be on our pull list. That's going to do it for us for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks so much for the continued support. The viewership and listenership continues to see me to grow at a pretty atmospheric rate. I'm really, excuse me, amazed and impressed, and so thankful that so many of you out there consider our opinions to be something worthy of listening to. Feel free to show up here at any time to join in on the live show. Feel free to hit up the E2KG Network on Twitter or Ultimate Awesomeness on Twitter, and let us know if you have any input or feedback, or in particular, if there is a comic that is out there that you want us to read. I've actually done a bad job. I'm sorry I've been sick, but I know a couple publishers have reached out to us on Twitter. They've just caught me at times like coming in and out of town for Thanksgiving, and while I've been fighting this sore throat. So my apologies to those publishers. I will try and get it in my task list to get back to you guys in the coming week. And I actually, there's one email account I have to check to see if one of the publishers sent us something that they want us to review. So that's going to do it for us. Thanks so much. Excuse me, for joining in on this episode. We will catch you next week. That's going to do it for us. We are out.
Yeah.